Welcome to Jungle Medicine. I'm Doc Sally ND.
My name is Grace, by the way.
Hi, Grace.
And I'm here as well on the podcast. I'm helping produce this podcast. I'm a social media manager and content creator. And today we're going to talk about a very interesting case study. I don't really know that much about it yet, but we're going to be listening with fresh ears together.
This is the Japanese tourist vegan case study. So, I work in Hawaii, and Hawaii is a tourist state. And one of the main groups of tourists that come here are Japanese people. They love Hawaii. They own half of Hawaii. That's how it is. We very much love our Japanese tourist friends because they keep our economy going. And it was really interesting that right after, this is sad but interesting, right after Fukushima happened, what we noticed in Hawaii was an amazing influx of young Japanese couples, tourists. And what had actually happened was Japanese families had gotten together and pooled their money, and an entire family would pool their money together to take their reproductive age children and get them out of the country because they were afraid nuclear fallout was affecting their children's reproductive abilities, which was really smart and really sane.
Yeah.
So we had a bunch of Japanese tourists, young, didn't speak English at all. So many tourists that come, they were prepared. They would have spoken some English, but a lot of these kids, and we're talking, when I say kids, I'm talking 15 to 30. Okay,
Wow.
Kids, to me, they're kids.
Right.
Are just suddenly dumped on the island and they're wandering around going, what do we do?
Oh my gosh.
Right, so it was way more than we would have normally seen. And a couple of them who were in their early 20s, didn't speak a word of English, came into my office to see me, and they had MRSA. Do you know what MRSA is?
Yeah.
Okay. It's antibiotic resistant skin infection that can be can spread very rapidly and actually kind of get under the skin and cause cellulitis and get in the bloodstream. And if it's left untreated, it can end up being a hospitalization, IV antibiotics, which of course don't work because what? It's antibiotic resistant. So once you get this thing, you are in a crap ton of trouble in some cases. So you can get the initial cut from this or scratch from this by snorkeling and scratching yourself on lava rock or going on a hike and falling on lava rock. Lava rock plays a big part, and this island is basically lava rock. So they had gone snorkeling, and they just gotten a little scratch snorkeling, and it turned into these flesh-eating wounds that were growing up their arms and legs. And when I first saw them, it was covering maybe 10% of their body, which was very distressing. And of course, antibiotics were not working. And no matter what antibiotic was rotated, was not working. Skin culture, send it in. What is this thing? It's MRSA. What treats it? When you do a skin culture, you swab the goopy bit, and you send it to the lab. They tell you what the bacteria is, and then they do a nifty little test called a susceptibility test, where they put it in little petri dishes, and then they drop antibiotics in there, and they look to see where the kill zone is for each antibiotic. So they'll send you a list of how much kill zone is there for each antibiotic. So if your treatment's not working, you can fall back on that antibiotic, and you'll have something that works. Well, these reports came back, nothing's killing this thing. Okay,
Dang.
Right. So I'm trying to explain this to them in my English, and they're trying to understand it in their Japanese. And we went through pretty much we went through naturopathic treatments. We went through allopathic treatments. They refused to go to the hospital. I was saying, please, you need to go to the hospital. No, we're scared. Because they were scared of everything.
Yeah.
Their culture was that,
Right.
kind of a hunkered down sort of culture. So finally, I get a friend in who speaks some Japanese.
Yeah.
And my friend who speaks some Japanese communicates with them. And they communicate to me, and I ask, what are you guys eating? Oh, we're strict vegans. It's the best way to be. And I'm like, oh, how long have you been strict vegans? Oh, 8 years. And so that is half their lives, basically, or a third to half their lives.
Wow.
And I was like, okay, so, and I got them to describe their diet, and there is maybe 20 to 30 grams of protein in their diet per day per person. So let's just give you a perspective. So someone my size is supposed to have about 70 to 80 grams of protein a day. That's like your baseline, not dissolve into a puddle and fall off the planet amount of protein.
Right.
Okay. Whether it's from an animal source or a vegetable source, we're not even talking about that. We're just talking amount of protein.
Right.
So not only were they vegan, but they were almost like a fruitarian type vegan, like a specific part of that community where they think that, God made plants to be eaten only if they make fruit that falls off the tree and basically asks you to be eaten.
Yeah.
That's kind of their philosophy. And it's very dear and it's very sweet and it's very fluffy and it's lovely. But it was killing them.
Yeah.
Because no matter what treatment I could put in there, if they do not have enough protein in their system to make new skin, they cannot heal the skin that has been eaten by the bacteria.
Yeah.
So this went on. And about day 10, this thing is covering maybe 20-25% of their body in some way.
Whew.
And I am just freaked out. I'm like, you guys have got to go to the hospital because what I'm doing is not working. So they were like, no, we're not going to go to the hospital. I was like, well, I'm going to have to, I don't know, call social service. There's got to be Japanese social service. Somebody's got to help you. Like, I've got to do something to help you. And finally they were like, okay, we'll eat a little bit of fish. And I was like, okay. So they each ate about this much fish per day.
Yeah.
And I got them to eat a little more seaweed, a little fish and a little seaweed.
Right.
And the next day the progression stopped. Literally, I'm not kidding you. I was measuring it because I was tracking very carefully what's going on with these people. I'm measuring it grow every day. The next day, no growth. Okay? They eat a serving of fish a day over the weekend in addition to their diet. And they come back on Monday and it shrank a little. This is with no new antibiotics because there's nothing else to put them on.
Right.
Okay? And then the next day after that, it shrank a little. And within about 2 weeks, it had completely gone. And all they did was add about 4 to 6 ounces of fish.
Wow.
Right. My point about that, my meta point about that is not that I think vegans are bad, not that I think that that's stupid, but the myopia that our culture is creating in people where they get an idea that something is a good idea. They type that in. Facebook says, here's a little video about how good that is. Right? And then once Facebook and Twitter and everybody else knows that that's what you like, what do?
They're going to push that algorithm
They
to them.
keep sending you more and more about how that's a good thing and how everything else is a bad thing and how that's a good thing. And so that sinks deep into people's brains. And the more online they are, the more electrolyzed they are, the deeper that sinks. Years and years of that, you get someone who goes, I'm going to pursue this path even to the point of death.
Yeah.
And not even know that that's what I'm doing.
Yeah.
And even if someone else who perhaps, has a doctorate in this field points out to you, hey, maybe you're killing yourself. It can take a massive amount of pressure and education to convince them to even try to think some other way.
Right.
So that is a huge social problem that I don't think is going away anytime soon. And I think the only thing we can do about that is educate ourselves that that's happening and that we as a human species, the way our frontal lobe is designed, we are susceptible to that problem. So I'm susceptible to that problem. So I was a strict vegan for about 8 years. There's a term called folie à deux. The French, we love the French. Folie à deux means madness shared by two. Have you ever heard this term?
Not specifically, but...
Oh, I love folie à deux. So folie à deux is what happens if you, and let's just say a lover, are relatively isolated and you become an echo chamber of two and you bounce your ideas off of each other back and forth like a squash court. And you don't ever have any other outside ideas introduced. And so your own ideas become more and more central to you and more important to you and more make more and more sense to you, even though they are deviating from reality and drifting at a steady rate, okay?
Yeah.
That can be exponential. And so if you don't have an outside perspective that differs from yours, if you are constantly self-reinforcing your own idea, you can end up way off course from any kind of functional, happy, healthy reality. And we are all susceptible to this. So, I'm susceptible to this. I'm not putting myself out as saying, I am the goddess of non-folie à deux. I'm saying we all do this. We're all human. There are certainly ways I'm sure I'm doing it. And I was, for example, a strict vegan for 8 years. But I was more like a Cheerios vegan. Like I did not know how to do that as right as you can possibly do it. So I got very, very ill. And to the point where my diet was, if not almost killing me, it was at least putting me in the functionally disabled category. And I tried everything else to fix that and didn't realize that unless I fixed my diet to include enough animal products from my physiotype, nothing else was going to really work. Just like with this vegan couple, you can throw as many antibiotics at them as you want. You can give them berberine until you're blue in the face. You can make sure that they're taking zinc. You can put any, little golden seal powder you want on here or anything.
Right.
You can do IV ozone, which we even did, which did help a little. But unless you're getting the fundamental nutritional building blocks of life that are right for your body, nothing else is going to work well. So there,
Yeah.
that's the vegan story.
Absolutely makes sense. And this is a really interesting conversation because I know you said you were vegan for 8 years, and I was vegan for 2.5 years. This fale à deux that you're talking about was totally my scenario.
Yeah.
Like that's how I got into that position through a relationship that with somebody who was very strictly vegan when I met them.
Sex is very motivating.
Well, yeah. It's true. Yeah. And I had also traveled across the country to live with this person.
Oh, wow. So you were dedicated.
Yeah. I had my own van, right? But then like I
fun.
went to California and we had this little house, and it was kind of like I knew as I was traveling to go see this person that I was falling in love with that I was gonna have to cut meat out of my diet. And so the week before I got there, I'm eating tuna salad. Like I'm trying to eat as much as I could because I'm like, okay, I know this is a big lifestyle change, and I had it in my head. This is good for me. This is gonna be good for me because I was going through a lot of gut issues already, and the conventional medical system was not able to help me.
Well, did it help?
Going vegan?
Did it help your gut issues?
I convinced myself that it did.
Okay. So we create a lens or a filter for ourselves that go, this is helping. The fact is that if you go from a standard American diet, which is uniformly horrible, to a plant-based diet that's whole food based, that is such a huge step up that most people are going to feel better.
Yeah. And I felt better
true.
in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
I felt more clear. I definitely was detoxing. So I was like, oh, my gut isn't better because I'm detoxing.
Right.
Right?
People abuse this term detox all the time. Anytime you have an adverse consequence to a health innovation, somebody on the internet is going to say, oh, you're just detoxing.
Right.
Most of the detox stuff is actually bullshit. You are not supposed to suffer to get better. Detox or herxomer reactions happen in very specific circumstances. They are not universally true of any dietary change.
Yeah.
So if someone starts throwing that detox word around at you without any science behind it, not reject it out hand, but be a little wary.
Right.
Be a little
Like,
wary.
what's the evidence of my body
Right.
actually going through detox, or maybe I'm just having a negative reaction to something I'm eating, which I was eating a lot of cashews, a lot of nuts, which I know we've talked about, like
oxalate
the
problem.
oxalates,
Yeah.
which is not great for the gut.
Yeah. Well, there's two problems with the nut thing. There's three main problems with the nut thing. And a lot of people will shift if they're going from meat to a plant-based diet. I have to say that a little facetiously, sorry. If we're shifting to that, we compensate with hearty things like nuts. So the three problems with the nuts are, one, oxalates, massive. You can kill your kidneys by loading up on these things. And just, there's a variable in how susceptible people are to that, but some people are very susceptible to it. Oxalates are parts of the plant that the plant puts in the plant around things that it wants you to not eat. Okay, so you don't overeat them. So it's like lining strawberry seeds, and it's in nuts because the seeds in the nuts want to become trees and plants.
Yeah.
They don't want to get all eaten down to nothing. But the plant will put things in the plant that help limit your consumption of it.
Yeah.
We overcome that when we take them and roast them and make them taste all yummy, yummy. But they're still in there. So there are like little crystal shards in the plant that can, metaphorically and to some degree literally, like poke holes in your kidneys. And so oxalates are really, really high in cashews and even higher in almonds. We love our almond milk.
I was having cashews.
We can do keto, and we can eat like a pound of almond flour a day. We can make almond flour muffins now. We've made it so convenient. Instead of going out and picking them off the tree, breaking open the husk, breaking open the shell, and eating that thing, we just have it in bags from Costco now.
And so this also brings up for me an environmental conversation, because the bubble I was in with the vegan diet is this is going to be good for my body, and this is going to be good for the environment as well.
Right.
And in some ways, I do believe that can be true. Not eating factory farmed meat, I think, is so important for your health and for the environment.
And for the animals.
Absolutely.
Couldn't agree more.
Exactly. And so I was thinking, oh, I'm eating all these like cashews and almonds. Like, this is better for the environment than the factory farmed meat. And like
I feel
like
you.
it's like comparing like apples to bananas, I guess, because there's a lot of environmental issues with growing and producing cashews and almonds,
Right.
even
So,
organically.
so this is all, it's like the wrapping on the Christmas present.
Yeah.
Okay, you can change the wrapping all you want, but the fact is that present's still there.
Mm-hmm.
And if we change the wrapping, which is changing our diets, we're ignoring the fact that inside this box is the fact that there are a lot of people on the planet.
Mm-hmm.
There are more people than we've ever had on the planet that we know of ever, by an order of magnitude.
Mm-hmm.
So that change, we as the dominant species on this planet have overtaken this planet, and we are not, our ability to do that has not caught up with our consciousness of our ability to manage that responsibility. And that is the problem. So
Yeah.
people are breeding too much, and we are not ecologically responsible for our growth rate.
Mm-hmm.
You can talk about cashews or you can talk about hamburger until you're blue in the face. Neither of those conversations deals with the real problem.
Yeah.
And no one who wants to have children, who wants to breed, who wants to reproduce, no one's talking about that problem. Because that gets into religion, and that gets into individual rights and freedom, okay? And the entire socio-political movement is designed to ignore or disguise or obfuscate that very basic fact.
Yeah.
So we have to address that. Often the problem is the more conscious the person is, the more they're likely to limit or delay their reproductive
Right.
rights. And the least aware or wanting to deal with this issue someone is, the more likely they are to breed. So we have to deal with that on a massive cultural and social level.
Yeah.
That's something that cannot be solved on an individual level. The more willing you are to solve it, the less you are contributing to the problem, the less consequential you are.
Yeah.
Because me not breeding cannot compensate for someone over there having 10 children in this day and age. I can't personally compensate for that.
Right.
So that's a very unpopular thing to say. My point is that there's way more than one way to have children in your life than to endlessly breed past your capacity to support.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I've had a foster child.
Yeah.
I've adopted 3 children. I've raised my sister's child. Like, I've had plenty of child energy in my life, and I managed to do that without myself breeding.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that choice is for everyone, but I am saying that, you know, if you just replace yourself, that's one thing. If you are contributing to the burgeoning exponential growth without sustained resources on the planet, that's another thing. And how is that serving your children? If you are contributing to creating an environment for them that's going to involve starvation eventually. Because if we continue at this rate with the lack of ability to take care of our environment that we have thus far as a species demonstrated, that's the inevitable conclusion.
Yeah.
So how is that joyful and happy and looking forward into the future? How is that? It's not.
Yeah.
So, and we have to have the frontal lobe capacity to accept this as reality. And that's what I'm talking about, the algorithm of reality drift.
Yeah.
Is not letting us accept this change. It is a fundamental change in the way human beings have to think and behave and act that's happening in a series of just a few generations. So you have millions of preceding generations for which reproducing more than your generation had in terms of numbers of people was necessary for survival. And all of a sudden, in 2 or 3 or 4 generations, that is flipped on its head.
Yeah.
And we as a species have not kept up.
Yeah, and I think a big issue with this is like we're so disconnected from how to actually survive on our own without the systems that are in place, without like the agricultural systems, which are not really it's very problematic.
There's enough calories. There's enough calories for most people in the world with the current agricultural system we have, to my knowledge. The problems are political and nutritional, because those calories are devoid of many of the nutrients we as a species need to survive. So we have a functional form of malnutrition, and you can go to any mall in America and see this.
Yeah.
Okay. So we have a lot of fluffy people with severe health problems happening at an ever younger age. I have patients in their teens and 20s manifesting frank diseases that I used to see in people in their 60s.
Right.
And that is terrifying. I have a 22-year-old patient whose testosterone level was 180. Let me just give you perspective on that. Normal testosterone is, according to medical reference ranges, around 280 to 300 to 1100. Okay, he's at 180 as a teenager with no apparent reason. He didn't get kicked in the ball in a soccer field. No, he just has this. Okay, but when we first started measuring testosterone, which was roughly 50 years ago, the average man walking down the streets, testosterone level was about 1500. That's men of all ages. The average man was about 1500. Okay, so what's happened is we've lost a few points every year, let's just say, on that scale. We've shrunk that scale every year since that recording. And what medicine has done is change the reference range. So we've just shrunk down what's normal, and we've accepted normal as healthy when we don't even really know what healthy is. We have nothing to compare to except someone from 50 years ago.
Wow.
Right.
Super
So now
interesting.
the reference range is, let's say, roughly 300 to 1100. And most men that I test of any age are somewhere 200 to 500.
Yeah.
That's most men. Okay.
Yeah.
So those men are a third or less of what a normal man was 50 years ago.
Wow, that's pretty insane.
That's shocking.
And that's
Yeah.
their go juice, you know?
Yeah.
They gotta have that testosterone.
Right. Right. It is. Without testosterone, men become depressed. They become
Yeah.
apathetic. They lose muscle mass. They're more prone to bone loss. I mean, the list of things that their prostate swells up. It's low testosterone. It contributes to prostatitis vast majority of the time. Not high testosterone, by the way. It's when their testosterone hyperconverts to a form called DHT. That is a stronger and more toxic to the prostate form. And that hyperconversion is in some degrees associated with declining total testosterone and free testosterone levels. So this is a very complex problem, but it's a very real problem. There is an assault in this culture on testosterone.
Yeah.
And part of that is that the food culture is estrogenified. So plastics have estrogen in them. I heard the statistic. I do not know if this is true because this is horrifying to me. So I'm telling you guys this. I don't know if this is true. I'm going to have to look it up. I heard that the average American, don't you love that term? The average American.
The average American.
The average American eats in microplastics the size of a credit card.
Yeah,
every
I've also
week.
heard this.
Every week.
I've read some documentation on this as well. It's absolutely horrifying. I think a big part of this is like people are drinking bottled water.
Bottled water's the worst, for sure.
But it's also in our food.
Right. It's in our food. Everything that you eat is covered with plastic. I had a family once. They were a Mennonite family, lovely family, and they decided to try and do the plastic-free challenge.
Yeah.
Which I encourage everyone to try this.
Yeah.
They decided to go for a month without eating any food that had ever touched plastic at any point in its production. They failed after 3 days.
Wow.
They couldn't make it 3 days.
Wow.
And these are Mennonites.
Wow.
Okay? Like, these are like Amish light, okay? Like, these
Amish
are like
light.
these are like the long dresses and the suspenders, really fine people. Their
Yeah.
clothing is like out of the 1800s. I mean, they're really trying. They are really trying. They made it 3 days.
I mean, it makes sense.
Yeah, because they could not find anything, not even to purchase,
Yeah.
that hadn't touched plastic.
Yeah.
Yeah, so credit card a week. Like, just imagine putting a credit card on a dinner plate and cutting it with a knife and fork and like chewing. Like, that is what we are doing.
Nutritional value.
Right, and so those plastics have not phytoestrogens. They have fake estrogens.
Yeah,
in them.
like xenoestrogen, I think.
Thank you. Xeno meaning foreign. Xenoestrogens bind to estrogen receptors many, many times more strongly than regular estrogen. So we think of it like a lock and a key, and the lock is on the cell membrane, and the key goes in there and it turns and the cell does a thing. That's what a receptor is. Okay, so certain molecules have a stronger affinity for that receptor, and a xenoestrogen will knock natural estrogen out of the way and bind to that receptor.
Yeah.
And then it's too strong, so it's like a key that gets stuck in a lock, and it'll only turn it on, and it leaves it on. Let's just say, and then that cell is overstimulated to do that thing in a very minimalistic fashion. You can think of that as causing cancer. Right, something growing that should have been told to stop growing.
Yeah.
Because natural estrogen would have left that receptor site,
Right.
but xenoestrogen will not.
Right.
So the problem with xenoestrogens, as far as medical practice is concerned, is that they are not testable at this point. There's no commercially available lab test I can run that can tell someone, hey, you're chock full of xenoestrogens, you're in trouble. Our conventional testing will only test natural estrogens. It won't test often the synthetic progestins and stuff. Like it doesn't test some of the hormones in birth control pills even. It'll just test the real thing. So I have no way of telling someone what their xenoestrogen burden is.
Right.
But I can tell you that it seems that the more xenoestrogens men are exposed to, the less testosterone they're showing up with as their own natural testosterone. And that's a serious problem.
Yeah.
So I have men in their 20s now on full hormone replacement.
Right.
Full hormone, which makes their balls shrink into tiny little cashews. Back around to the cashews. Here we are again.
Back to the cashews.
Right. One other point about the nuts thing.
Yeah.
Is that most of us, if we were trying to do, and like I said, I was a Cheerios vegan, so I was terrible. I didn't know what I was doing at all. I was at a boarding school when I started this.
Yeah, so you don't have a lot of options.
Right, so I'm at the food bar, and there's this row of cereals, and there's the milk, and I'm using apple juice to eat my Cheerios with because I'm a vegan, right? And that was my breakfast, right? Yeah, I was really trying, though. But most of our plant-based foods are not being prepared the way traditional cultures prepared them. So we're stealing foods from we get cashews. Like, who in Seattle ever seen a cashew tree? No. Cashews are indigenous to someplace very far away, very tropical. So we take their food and we put it over here and we eat it, but we don't take with it the cultural knowledge of how to eat that food safely.
Yeah.
So nuts and seeds and grains need to be soaked. Almost every culture that we know of that ate them processed them very carefully. They would soak them overnight. They would throw that water away. They might soak them again. Okay? They would soak them in yogurt water or lye water or ashes from the fire and water or something, sea salt water, something. And that process broke down some of the anti-nutrients in the plant. So it would go out in the water. And then you would cook it long, low, and slow. And so when we just say, oh, well, raw is better or whatever, we're going to stew it our way, we're taking in massive amounts of plant chemicals that are inflammatory that we're not even aware exist. Let's say you're trying to move away from animal foods and you go, oh, hey, nuts are a great alternative. You don't even know some of the problems with that. You don't know about oxalates. You don't know about lectins. You don't know about mold contaminating that food supply. You don't know what kind of ecological devastation is occurring when they clear-cut rainforests to grow cashews. Like, there's so many layers of issues. And if you think you are socially or morally immune from judgment because you've switched from animals to plants, you are incredibly ignorant about what's actually happening on this planet ecologically. And need to be educated.
Right.
Which is
that
sad.
was me. When I was in that position, I was so... I had my
Algorithm
blinders
out.
on.
You were
I was
so algorithmed
algorithmed
out.
out.
Yeah.
I had the, what's it called? The French thing.
I did it all by myself.
You did it all by
I
yourself.
just decided the way to save the planet is to just eat plants. I just decided that on my own.
Yeah.
And I believed that for a long time.
How did you get that information? I know you mentioned you read some books.
How did I get I think what turned it around for me was actual video or pictures of South America being devastated to grow soy plants. If you just look at a South American village, okay, there's film of these places, and they have taken these indigenous local people and squished them into these tiny little, horrible looking little villages, and all around them are acres and acres of nothing but soy. And soy was the main protein in my diet when I saw this. And I was like, what have they done to the rainforest that these people used to live in and around? It's gone, and it is now growing my dinner. Okay? That is just, there is just no escape from that fact. I don't care what you eat. You have to look at what's being destroyed to create what you eat. Yeah. And how to deal with that and how to minimize that footprint. And how to create sustainable solutions to that. So that's when I realized that, and then I was horribly depressed. And then I found Weston A. Price Foundation, and they are at least working towards creating a sustainable agriculture, which is an animal plant-based cycle. Here's another thing that I didn't realize as a vegan is I had never really grown plants. I was a suburban gal. Right. This was all theoretical knowledge to me. Right. I'm in boarding school. I'm from suburbia to boarding school to college. I'm like super self-righteous about all this stuff, you know. And I had a farmer come up to me and tell me that I was an idiot. And I'm like, okay, rude. Right? And he was like, you are such an idiot. You are such a city person. Do you not realize that you need animals to grow plants? I'm like, what do you mean? We have tractors. He's like, no, you idiot. You have to have nitrogen.
The poop.
and what do you think fertilizer is? And I was like, minerals. And he's like, where do you think we get those minerals? I was like, I don't know. He's like, it comes from poop. Where do you think the poop is coming from? How do you think you can grow a plant that you can eat without poop?
Yeah.
And where does poop come from? I was like, oh, duh. And then I went and tried to grow some plants without poop. Let me tell you, they do not make a lot of food. Like
Yeah.
you actually, I challenge you, oh vegan, please go out and grow a garden. Do not use any animal-based products. Do not use any bone char. Do not use any plant-based animal-based fertilizer of any kind. See what you can grow. You are going to be horribly disappointed.
Yeah.
Because it's not much. Okay, so true sustainable eco-agriculture honors the cycle of life of animals and plants in a harmonious cycle.
Yeah.
And works to make that as humane and ecological as possible.
Yeah.
And that's what's happening on Joel Salatin's farm in the Shenandoah Valley. That's what Weston A. Price Foundation is trying to promote, is how to create that life cycle sustainably, truly sustainably. And that involves eating plants and animals.
Yeah.
So most of us are basically omnivorous and seem to be the happiest as omnivores. There are radical fringe diets to the left and the right of this. I have patients who are extreme carnivores. I have patients who are extreme vegans. There are some places where health can be improved with any specific diet, but overall, most of us tend to trend towards being omnivores by inclination.
Yeah.
So that seems to me to be a natural reflection of the animal plant life cycle. So
Yeah, that absolutely makes sense to me as well. And that's what I ultimately came to through my journey of being vegan as well. Like, I was eating plant-based. I thought it was better for the environment. And then I started to realize maybe it's not better for the environment. Maybe it's not the best thing for my body. And as I started to slowly bring more meat into my diet, I felt so much better. Another big part of it was like, I was losing my hair. I was like getting really skinny.
losing your hair is a big one for women.
Feeling really dizzy. I didn't
don't
have
have
it.
it. Yeah.
And then I was like, you know what? Let me just try to drink some bone broth.
Yeah. Which is not to say that this is the only problem, because I have plenty of people in my practice who are exhausted all the time and losing their hair, who are eating meat.
Yeah.
It is not that meat is going to save you.
No.
That's the thing. The flip side of it is a lot of people go from radical veganism to like carnivore diet, and they think that's going to save them. This issue alone is not the only issue upon which your health can turn.
Yeah.
It is fundamental, but it is not exclusive. Trying to dig deeper and deeper into a more radical, extreme solution in your diet sometimes can be the answer, but a lot of times it's not the only answer, and you got to look at other things.
Yeah,
You know,
for sure. And diet's just one piece of that puzzle.
Right, but it's like the bottom piece.
It's the foundational
bottom
piece.
Yeah.
Super important.
So you were asking me, the other thing that helped kind of get me out of it was, kind of almost dying, right? Like I'm desperate to the end of my rope kind of thing. But then there's also a book called The Vegetarian Myth, which is a really good book. It's by a woman named Leah Keith. And it basically kind of encapsulated my journey. Like it's like her journey and my journey were these parallel paths.
Wow.
And she started out as an ardent vegan and believing that agenda. And she very painfully, over many years of poor health and desperation, came to realize that she had to eat meat. It was her or the planet, basically. And so she tried a little meat and started getting better. And then she started actually looking at the sustainability issue with a different lens.
Yeah.
And found that there are ways to grow animal and plant food in harmony ecologically. And one consideration is maybe we should all just eat a little less, right? Like most people eat too many calories. So
The
regardless
portion
of,
sizes in America.
right. So if you just eat less of higher quality food, your budget can stay roughly the same. Okay, your ecological footprint massively shrinks. Your landfill footprint massively shrinks. I mean, how many bags of chips that you don't eat then don't go in a landfill?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so if there are ways to be conscious about this issue that don't involve slowly killing yourself. So that was her long thought out, painful conclusion. So that is now my conclusion is, hey, fast 1 day a week, right? Eat 500 calories less a day than you're eating right now. You'll probably be just fine.
Right.
And you will crave less if you don't eat processed empty calories, because those are triggering you to feel unfulfilled because the nutrients are not there that you need. So your body still goes, Thanks, that was great. I still need zinc. Thanks, that was great. I still need selenium. Thanks, that was great. Where's the copper? You're still going to be looking in your environment. I have patients who eat dirt and like gravel and fingernail clippings and hair, their own hair. It's called pica, this condition.
Yeah.
I have more and more patients that show up, kids and adults, that have pica.
Yeah.
And the adult ones are kind of like self-shaming themselves about it. They do it in
course.
private. They don't want people to see. But they, like, I have a patient that buys chalk off Amazon and eats it because there's this overwhelming craving for those minerals.
Yeah.
And she does not know how to get them. She pretty much eats McDonald's, you know, that level of food.
Right.
And it's so hard for me because to convince her, because at some point, the nutritional deficiencies affect your ability to think and focus
Of course.
and retain information.
Yep.
So I have told her for years now, listen, you really need to eat some real food because the calcium that you really need, that chalk, you're gonna poop out that chalk. It's not a digestible form of calcium.
Right.
So you can eat chalk all day long, but you're still gonna need calcium
Yeah.
because real calcium is in a form that your body can actually absorb and use.
Yeah.
You know, she can't understand what I'm saying. It's really sad.
Yeah. Yeah, it's tough once you get to that point of the brain is so foggy, so unclear, you're not able to process things. Because I even remember being vegan and like that was such a huge issue that I was having. Like I was not able to really work. I wasn't really able to function on any level. And I was like trying to get help from people and people are like, well, maybe you're neurodivergent, you have ADHD, and that could be true. But I think ultimately what it came down to is that I was not getting the right nutrients. And once I started eating meat again, everything started to make sense.
Well, all those labels are accurate, and I'm not disparaging anyone with any of those labels.
Yeah, for sure.
However, we are a culture that says if we can put a name on it and we can make a code for it and we can charge insurance for it, that has some kind of inherent meaning.
Yeah.
And all that's doing is saying something about something that's happening without doing anything to help, except for that, of course, there's a drug for it that now your insurance will cover if you have this label. So no one's looking at what is causing, well, I don't say no one, but culture in general is not looking at what's causing these symptoms. And nutritional inadequacy is fundamental.
So that's why it's so important to find someone that you can really have this conversation with and go in depth.
Yeah.
I think that's why the work that you do is so important. And I'm super grateful to have met you and to be working with you because I get to learn so much. And I'm someone who like has always been passionate about health. Always is looking for ways to improve my health. For so long, I've struggled so much.
That's a very common story. It seems like those of us who are the canary in the coal mine that are coming into this a little bit more fragile, a little bit more sensitive, a little bit more reactive, those are the ones who are on this health quest or this health journey. It's almost like we know I got to save myself because this ship is sinking. And I can feel the ship going down sooner than anyone else, so I got to start bailing. You know, like I've been bailing, like I was a very unhealthy child. Like I missed a day of school a week for my entire elementary. Like I was just sickly and no one knew why. And it turns out, you know, I was eating like Wonder Bread and rice-a-roni and mac and cheese. And, you know, like my diet growing up was pretty abysmal, but plentiful and lovingly prepared. Right. So when you grow up with this weakness, you're looking harder and harder to stay afloat yourself.
So what would you recommend for somebody who is maybe in the position of maybe they're eating vegan and they're kind of not sure where to go from here? Maybe they're having some health challenges and they're just not sure if
there's a really simple thing you can do. There are lab tests now in the integrative health field that are high quality, validated, real lab tests. There's one called the cellular micronutrient array. And it's a simple blood test, and you can, it pops open your red blood cells and looks inside there to see what vitamins, minerals, and amino acids you have. So what is your tissue able to actually get from your diet, digest, absorb, and assimilate, and make into healthy you with? Is there enough of these things? So if you want a snapshot of, is my diet and digestion adequate, get this blood test. Simple. So any licensed naturopathic physician, any physician can order it, but generally you're going to find a licensed naturopathic physician is going to be more aware of it.
Right.
It's about $199, I think, for the basic test.
Okay.
Which is not great. That's expensive for a lot of people, but at least you know it's available.
Yeah.
If you cannot do that, then most any doctor in America can order some basic vitamin tests along with your annual blood work. They can order you a methylmalonic acid test, an MMA test, and a vitamin B12 level. Those two tests together are a good snapshot of, am I getting enough B12? B12 is one of the critical nutrients. We all know about B12. There are many, many other critical nutrients, but that can be deficient in a vegan diet, but everybody focuses on B12 because it can, cause permanent brain damage if it goes on too long, which I've seen, and it's very sad.
Yeah.
B12 deficiency in vegans looks like this very particular baffled, irritated bewilderment thing where they seem pretty okay until you challenge their worldview in any way or try to give them new information. What's happening is their brain seems to be unable to they can run on the program that's already been created, but if you try to put new information in, it's like their brain can't accept that and change a worldview based on it.
That's really, really interesting you bring that up because I've experienced that. And I'm not that kind of person. Like, my whole life, I've always been someone who looks at all the different perspectives. And when I was in that for so long,
scary.
I could not comprehend.
We see this a lot in elderly people who are not trying to be vegan, but their stomach acid is so low, their digestive fire is so low that they can't pull their nutrients out of their diet very well, and they will become B12 deficient. And unless we check their blood work, we wouldn't know because their diet doesn't necessarily indicate that they would be.
Interesting.
But you check them, and so B12 is a direct lab test, and MMA, methylmalonic acid, is an inverse lab test. So MMA shows up if you're B12 deficient, and you use B12 as part of an energy production cycle. So if you get stuck in that cycle and you can't complete that cycle, you throw this chemical out into the blood that you can pick up. So if you get those two tests, you can see, am I getting enough B12 and is it being used to make the right amount of energy in my cell, roughly speaking. So that's something that any MD in the world, any primary care physician or provider should be able to order. Insurance should be able to pay for it if your provider codes for nutritional deficiency, which I can't remember the code for that, but you can look it up. There's an ICD-10 code for malnutrition or nutritional deficiency or a deficiency of a specific vitamin. And between one of those codes, your insurance should be key to pay for that test. So you can get the B12 test from a regular doctor. You can get a vitamin D, 25-hydroxy D test, and that's also really important. You can get folate on from a regular laboratory. You can get iron. You can get calcium, although calcium's not that accurate in blood for nutrition. But those are some just basic ones that anyone should and could check if you can't afford the cellular micronutrient array. Oh, I remember the moment I became unvegan. You want to hear the moment?
Yes, I do want to hear this.
So I was too sick to practice. I had closed down I had a 6-week waiting list in Seattle during my residency, and I closed my practice because I was too weak to practice medicine.
Wow.
I would work one day as a doctor and I would take like 5 days and lay in bed to recover and then be okay for a day or two, practice one day, and it would all start over. 6 months of that, and no one could figure out what was wrong with me. And I went, okay, I'm going to die. So if I'm going to die, I might as well die in paradise. So I just sold my house, closed my practice, took that little bit of money and moved to Hawaii. That's how I got here.
Oh,
it was like,
wow.
Prepping to die in the most beautiful place possible. So I'm in the jungle and I'm dying and I'm laying around. I feel terrible. Okay. And my very sweet neighbor down the street had a bunch of kids and a little farm. And I went down there and they were doing this raw milk drop off where they had a community that had purchased raw milk from a dairy, and they actually kind of, at the time, I think they kind of snuck it out of the dairy. Like, the dairy didn't want to sell raw milk, but they made a deal on the side, and it was this big vat, and it was a big thing. And
I'm sure it's still kind of like that.
It's totally illegal. It's totally illegal. And so I'm not going to say their names, because this was 20 years ago anyway. But they had like 50-gallon drum of milk.
Wow.
That they had dropped off at this little farm, and people would come with their buckets and get their raw milk, And I was like, oh my God, that is so, you know what they're doing to those cows? I mean, I was just like, it's judgmental as hell, And I was just all, right. But then I looked at them. These are people that are biking for miles through the tropical jungle heat to get their milk. Like, they are insanely healthy people.
Yeah.
Like, their muscles have muscles, right? And their skin is all glowing. And I'm like, and then I go over to this woman's house, and they had killed a wild pig, and they had butchered that thing themselves, and they had chopped it up in little bits, and they were frying the belly pork of this thing. And I walk up, and I'm like, oh my God, that's horrible. And she was feeding it to her children. These are little kids. And she's feeding them chunks of fried feral pork fat. And I was just like nauseated. I was disgusted. I was so pissed off. I was so judgmental. I was such a fucking snob, right? And I walk by and I'm like, what are you doing? And she was just so kind to me. She was just like, oh, well, this is just what we do. And she was the Weston Price Foundation member that I've mentioned, before, is how I found out about this. And I was like, God, that's disgusting. And then I look around. These are the healthiest, happiest, most beautiful children I've ever seen in my life. They had long, glossy, flowing hair. They had beautiful, plump faces. They had glowing skin. They were out actually playing in the woods. Like, it was insane. And I looked at her and her kids, and I looked at myself, and I went, oh, I may have a doctorate, but I'm an idiot. Oh. Right? Like, and so I went, So then I was thinking about this. And then I go back to my farm. I have a mac nut farm. Okay, beautiful mac nut, vegan. I'm growing vegan mac nuts because I am with it, right? So I have 400 mac nut trees, and I have fenced it in because I'm not going to use any pesticides or herbicides. And I had gotten sheep to graze down the weeds so you can harvest the mac nuts. Yeah. But I'm never going to eat the sheep, right? They're my friends. Right? We are in partnership to sustain this land, right?
Yeah, which is true.
Then I found out, okay, this is so fucking irritating. Okay, then I found out, so I go to apply for organic validation for my orchard. Yeah. And the organic certifying body turned me down flat. And I said, why? What's going on? They said, well, you use sheep in your orchard. I'm like, yeah, but we don't eat the sheep. She's like, yeah, but there's sheep poop in your orchard, and that's not organic standard. You can't use any animals at all, right? Look at that. I mean, yeah, you cannot use any animals at all to raise your plants if you're going to get organic certification. So the fact that I had chosen to use sheep to graze the weeds in my orchard instead of spraying or mowing was enough to disqualify me. Right.
That is so...
Isn't that
having
sick?
A moment.
That is so
I'm having
sick
a moment
and
because...
so sad. Right. Because basically what they're saying is sustainable agriculture is impossible. And that's why some eco farmers or sustainable permaculture farmers are moving away from organic certification, right? Because it is so limiting to it does not honor the actual cycle of life.
Right.
So, and let me just point out that the Great Dust Bowl was created using 100% organic agriculture. So there's a huge problem with organic as a sustainable path. Although it is the best we can do a lot of times at Costco, it's better than nothing, right? But anyway, so I've got my sheep in my orchard, and I'm fuming over this lack of organic certification. I'm fuming. And I have decided I'm going to sell my nuts myself at the market, and I did, and it was $4 an hour I was making. So I was a little proud of myself because I've dragged myself out of bed to do this, right?
Right.
So I got in my orchard, and one of my little lambs had died. He had gotten caught in a vine, and he had actually strangled him little self, and he had died. He had passed, and I felt so bad because I had not taking care of him properly. I hadn't cut the vines or whatever, So I look at his little body and I go, well, oh, little fellow, at least you're not going to go to waste because I'm going to cook this little lamb and I'm going to feed it to my dogs. So that at least it doesn't go to waste, right? So I don't know why I thought dogs need cooked lamb. But at the time, I'm thinking, well, they need cooked.
They need it cooked,
right? So I take it up to my house and I put it on the grill and it starts cooking. Okay? And the smell of freshly cooked, forest-raised, humanely handled lamb hits my nostrils. And this thing goes off in my brain. You could maybe choose to live. You could maybe choose to live. Ding, 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 ding. And I was like, because remember, it had been 8 years since I'd eaten meat.
Yeah.
Okay. And I went, well, maybe I'll just try a little tiny taste. Because I just saw my neighbor eat pork and it didn't kill her. Right? Yeah. So I take one bite and all of a sudden my entire nervous system went, oh my God, she might let us actually live. And I ate half of that lamb. I said a prayer. I was crying the whole time. I was eating and sobbing and eating and sobbing. And then I'm like, and that was the turning point. But I had to actually grow it myself and see that it had as good a life as possible for me to even let myself do that.
Right.
So
wow, that's such a powerful
right,
story.
it was quite a thing.
I want to have a deeper understanding of the relationship and the connection to those animals that I am consuming. And I think it's the same with our plants. Like, if we can learn how to grow our own food, if we can learn to have a relationship with the animals that we're consuming, I think it does so much more for us than buying that meat even at the store.
Well, not everybody can be a farmer now. There's
True.
not enough planet
It's not
to do
for
that.
everyone in
So
the space.
if you can grow your own, like I have a cow. Okay, I have a dairy cow. We have a beautiful little Dexter A1 A2. Like we're with it, right? We're milking. We have a milking co-op. It's a lovely thing.
Yeah.
Not everyone can do that. I'm super blessed and just freaking determined. Like I have this level of dogged determination and this level of entitlement culturally that allows me to own a 9-acre farm in Hawaii. Like, not everyone can do that.
Yeah.
So being respectful of people for whom that's not a choice is really important, and not shaming them. Okay.
Absolutely.
You do the best you can with the tools you have at the time.
Absolutely.
You're always trying to do that. But you can seek out farmers who are going in the path of sustainable, full cycle of life agriculture. There's a chicken farm down the road.
Yeah.
It's so cute. It's called Puna Chicks.
That's where I got the bones for this bone broth we're sipping on.
And it tastes better.
It's so
right?
good.
So their chickens are outdoors. They eat real bugs. They run around on the grass.
Yeah.
They're yummy, and they're harvested quickly and sustainably. And that's,
Yeah.
hey, it's a good thing.
Yeah, and so choosing to support them.
And does it cost a little more? It costs a little more. You have to look at the fact that we are vastly algorithmed out and completely emotionally distorted about the amount of resources we should be using on food. The average American spends, about 10% of their budget on food.
Yeah.
Okay. Historically, throughout time, a human being would spend most of their work resource on getting and preparing food. 50, 70, 80% of their day would be going out, getting food, preparing that food every day. So we have shrunk from, let's say, a 60 to 70% budget to a 10% budget because we want all these other things. And so when someone says, hey, organic eggs cost $1 more a dozen, people freak out. I don't want to pay that, because we have been taught to do that over several generations.
Yeah.
It's the rice-a-roni culture that we're in. So you have to go, what's my health worth? What's the health of the planet worth? What is the emotional health of that chicken worth to me, right? Like, I will not eat a commercial pig in any way, shape, or form because the life that pig lived is not acceptable to me. My karma, my heart will not allow me to do that. So I'm not saying pork's a bad food to eat. I'm saying my personal choice is to not eat that because I want to value the lives of pigs, and the way pigs are raised is not okay with me.
Yeah.
So will I eat a wild pig that somebody shot in the forest? You betcha. And is it good? Oh my God, yeah. But will I eat bacon on a McDonald's cheeseburger?
No.
I would rather go vegan and suffer than do that because everybody has their line.
Yeah.
And that's my personal line. But everybody should have a line, and they should think about their line. And that line should be moving. The more education and awareness you have, that line should move. And a good way to get started is to educate yourself. So I would encourage, and we can find links to these books, to people to read Leah Keith's book, for people to join the Weston A. Price Foundation. It's $40 to join, and it is a world of education. Are they right about everything? Of course, no one's right about everything. Do I agree with them about everything? Of course not. But they are well-intended and going in the right direction.
Yeah, and that's the thing with any kind of resource is just keeping an open mind and looking at the different perspectives and forming like, how do you feel about it? What is your belief?
And one thing about Weston Price that's really cool is if you join, they will send you a source book, a little booklet every year that tells you where to buy sustainably grown animal products and vegetable products and fermented foods. Like, it's a little book that says, hey, the very best is available from said Amish farm and said someplace, and then good choices are here, and then acceptable choices are here, and then don't even think about this. So it's this little book you can take to go, wow, I really need some grass-fed beef.
Yeah.
Look, here are these great farms that are raising beautifully raised, healthy grass-fed beef, and they'll ship to my door.
Yeah.
Right? So with just a little bit of effort, you can at least take part of your food budget and move it toward a sustainable, ecologically responsible, and better for you direction.
Yeah.
So anybody can take the step they can afford in that direction.
For sure.
Right. So they're wonderful. And then anything Joel Salatin's ever written, you should read. He's got a polyface farm in Virginia, and he is modeling sustainable agriculture for all of us. He's very brave. And then there's a group called the Farm to Consumer Legal Defense. I forgot their last name, organization. And if you want to put your money where your mouth is, you can donate to them. They're working to protect the rights of small family farmers and sustainable farmers. They're trying to make raw milk legal in all 50 states.
Oh,
Hawaii is one of the last holdouts. Raw milk sales are not legal here, which is just crazy, but here we are. So after I got well enough to get out of bed, then I kind of became like a little bit of an activist. And I became the Weston Price chapter leader for Hawaii County for several years. And what the chapter leader does is they just make themselves publicly available. Mm-hmm. And if you want to know, hey, where can I find raw milk in your community? Where can I find fresh eggs? Where can I find grass-fed lamb? If there is a resource for that, they'll give you that resource.
Oh,
so they maintain a list of farms that sell food and produce and all kinds of great yummies, and they'll send it to you. So you can access the chapter leader. I think you have to be a member, but I'm not member, meaning $40 you've paid for a year, right?
Right.
But maybe anybody can access that.
Okay.
So so that's a resource.
Yeah.
That you can get started with.
Yeah, that's a pretty easy, direct way to get the information.
Oh.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much, everyone, for joining us in this conversation.
This is the Jungle Doctor signing out.
Yeah, Dr. Sally, thanks so much for being here,
Yay,
for hosting Jungle Medicine, for us to have these important conversations. We are here every odd Wednesday, and you can find us on all platforms where you watch or listen to your podcasts. And until next time,
Aloha.
aloha.